Hello and welcome to the Lion Go Show with Sir Strife as your host. And this is being filmed live on Vong Live, and this is being recorded. So if you come on the show, we have rights to record you, and you cannot report us and DMC us. And as our guest today, we have James from Britain. Your mic's muted.
Yes, I was told to mute it. Hello.
Yeah, and we got Bod 2 Bits from the UK also.
I'm from the UK also.
Yeah, and we got Atheist Coffee from Canada.
That's me.
And the topic today, as seen on the screen, is indoctrination. And would you like to start the floor, James?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've kind of just come out of the blue here to talk to you and to be on this wonderful show. I'm a 20-year-old English literature and language student from the UK, and I've taken a particular interest most recently in literary criticism in theology, and am fully involved in the Enlightenment and the experience of secularism. My experience with indoctrination in particular stems from a very early age, where I was baptized into the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, and every Sunday I was forced into going to Mass and was told a series of things that I was meant to believe and brainwashed into believing that the eternal damnation was essentially real, and I would be going there should I defile the book, as it were. At the age of about 11 or so, I was about to get confirmed, as it's called in the Roman Catholic Church, in which another name is added to your name, and you are to become a soldier of Christ. And my kind of young, rather, unknowing brain jumped to conclusions, thinking soldier meant I would be fighting in some kind of war. Later, obviously I wasn't, but the term still struck me as odd. And from that moment on, it was kind of a steady movement into rejecting all notions of religion. But it's definitely led me to a point where I now look upon the Roman Catholic Church in particular with an air of definite contempt, and I see it for its full indoctrination now, definitely.
Okay, and how about you introduce yourself, Atheist Coffee, and what you were once upon a time?
Well, it can be a long story, but I live, I guess you said, in Canada. I and my family, I had a couple brothers at the time. When I was 9 years old, my family converted to Christianity, and it was a relatively fundamentalist type of Christianity that we gravitated to. And so I grew up in that. I was homeschooled, and from that point on, rather insulated. I mean, we were all in it together. I don't. I don't blame my indoctrination on my parents per se. I think we all make our own choices where that's concerned. I guess being a child, you tend to take what's said at face value, but I mean, so do a lot of adults who convert. They take these things at face value too. So without being critical or being examining the claims. And so I went to Bible school, and after I graduated grade 12, I entered the ministry, was a Baptist minister and a youth pastor on and off, and eventually, I guess, saw the confirmation bias in certain beliefs that I held, and started examining my beliefs and in extension the things that I'd swept under the rug for many, many years, and deconverted rather abruptly, and that was somewhere in 2009, I believe. And so I guess I'm not sure exactly what else you want me to say about that, but I was thinking about indoctrination in regards to the topic here, and it seemed to me that one of the most powerful forces of indoctrination in my life was myself. I mean, I was very zealous in becoming more. I mean, I studied theology. That's what I did. I studied the Bible, and I kind of indoctrinated myself into this type of fundamentalism, and I just get deeper and deeper and deeper into it, and more zealous all the time. And it was it was very hard to get out of, to leave. And but I'm glad I did, especially for the homophobia that was part of it, and some of the other things that are really really harmful to people. So yeah, I could probably talk about it for a long time, so I'm trying to keep it a little bit concise here.
Well, what would you say is the source? Like, would you say indoctrination is what would you say is the source of it the most?
Um, People's need to believe. Um, you're not aware of many scientific bases of reality, many other explanations. I mean, your religious belief system explains a lot for you. It gives you a lot of meaning and purpose beyond death. It takes away the fear of death. It gives you hope. And so I think the main driving force behind religion and indoctrination is an individual's need to believe, because you accept indoctrination under those terms. And whether it comes from outside, from other people telling you, or your own studies, or yourself, you just digging deeper into your religion, I think it all comes back to what you want to believe.
You have anything to note? Bored to bits?
Well, I was never indoctrinated. I mean, I grew up in a very C of E family, Church of England, which it's sort of cucumber sandwiches, not a lot else really. So I did Sunday school, but it was just stories. It wasn't anything to be taken particularly seriously. And it's only really recently that I've been trying to get a handle. I mean, I've known some people. I've known Jehovah's Witnesses. I've known people who've been brought up in a fairly rigid Roman Catholic childhood. But it's only recently that with the internet and YouTube that I've got interest. And I am more interested in why people believe and the transition, how you go from a position of believing this and having to be in this situation of cognitive dissonance where part of your rational brain is saying, well, I know the world's this old and I know science works like this, but I have to believe the Bible because it's important to me. And I'm not making light of that. I think it is important to people, but it's how they make that transition, because I think until we learn how people are able to make that transition, we're not going to be able to drag more people out of the indoctrination, which is, I think, very, very dangerous, where, to my mind, people can believe whatever they want. It doesn't matter, as long as it doesn't hurt or excuse hurt imposed on other people. But the fact is that religion does excuse a lot of terrible things in the world. So we need to find a way to connect with these people and show them that there is another way. Well, I had a conversation last night with a couple of people saying that one of the problems with atheism is that really what you're doing is you're taking sweets off the children, but you're not offering them anything in return. You're basically offering them a vacuum. And someone had suggested the idea that should we be embracing some sort of the paraphernalia that religion has, give atheism some of that sort of pomp and circumstance, so that it gives people something, a church to connect to. And obviously that's anathema to what most of us think of as atheism, but I understand the idea behind it, which is that, what do you do when somebody's mother is dying of cancer and they're clinging on to this empty religion you go to them and say, well, actually, what's going to happen is she's going to die and the worms are going to eat her, and that's the end. You're not really offering anybody something, and I suppose that's where I come from, is trying to understand why people believe, what the steps are that leads them away from that belief, but also how do you comfort people? How do you, in the reality that we know exists, which people aren't ready to accept, how do you cushion their fall from their cozy, fuzzy world of Jesus to the real world of atheism?
Well, I mean, from my opinion, it seems like the whole idea of that, for comfort and stuff, atheism is just a position of belief in a sense. It's nothing more. You can have secular religions like humanism, I guess, and such, or Buddhism.
Well, I mean, you can't tell a child, and you're right, like, grandma's gone to a better place and she's happy now. But for me, the biggest relief was my grandfather's not burning in hell. I mean, when I realized there was no afterlife, it wasn't the despair that I thought was going to be. It was an overwhelming relief. And you're exactly right about it. It almost, in one sense, takes away the candy, but in another sense, the candy's poisoned. And the farther down the rabbit hole you go, because I grew up, and there wasn't a day went by where my thoughts didn't turn to what I thought was the reality of my grandfather's screaming, burning suffering, and it just. I think it's equally as comforting to say, well, she's not burning in hell.
Can you mute your mic? Mute the thing on Vlog bits, because we hear an echo. But I would note, it seems like to do with mental scarring, wouldn't you say, Atheist Coffee?
How do you mean?
Like, it sounds like, oh, the burden of this mental anguish of the mental image of your grandfather, burning in hell
Yeah.
for eternity, or unless you're a nihilist, but
I took it literally. I really, really believed it. I mean, I embraced that worldview, and it was damaging. It was mentally damaging.
yeah.
A lot of believers that I know don't fully embrace what they claim is the reality of that. They gloss over it and talk about, he deserves to go to hell, that kind of thing. But I really understood those claims.
You have anything to say, James?
Yeah, I mean, you're in the club until you start questioning the rules. And for me, that was one of the most vital things to kind of learn and see. From a young age, in the Roman Catholic Church, as an altar server as well, which I served the priest, I served the altar. I would be there at Mass in a cassock, helping out and doing the whole wine and the bread and everything, But when you start questioning things, when you see trickles of anguish or things you might feel bad towards in the church community, things start getting a little messy. When my mum divorced my father because he had been adulterous and for many other reasons, he wasn't a nice man, she was disregarded by my church. She couldn't receive the Eucharist or whatever. And that I think was the first instance that I thought that there's something they're not telling me here, if you see what I mean. There's something that they're not, that's wrong, I guess. And then it went from that to handing out flyers that were anti-euthanasia and things like that. And me questioning, what if they want to die? Is that not their right? And me then having to go to confession and confess that I'd said that, it became very much like, it's all very innocent and it's all incredibly perfect, Especially the Roman Catholic Church. You have to remember, they disregard the first rule of of the Bible, of the Ten Commandments. Don't make paintings, don't decorate your church. as many other denominations do these days, but they kind of started doing that first. You are dressed up and blinded by the aesthetic church and by the music and the happy singing and the rest of it. The ritualization of it. We kiss the feet of Jesus and things like that. And I gradually just became, but when you're caught up in that, the cracks begin to show. And that, for me, is what happened. And when those cracks began to show, and I wanted to look through them, I was punished for it. And I think that is the ultimate thing for me. Yes, it's truly wonderful to have, undying faith, if you must, in higher beings to help your own mental kind of state. But it's completely wonderful and so much better to be free of that and celebrate life more than you do death. And for me, that was the start of me starting to see how indoctrinating the Catholic Church in particular are. The diocese that they operate in are held by a bishop that has their own opinions of things. If you get a good bishop, the diocese may be relatively relaxed. The Diocese of Leeds that I was under, in fact, was a mix, to be honest, of both relaxed and kind of very strict religious teachings. And a couple of times the priest was kind of slapped on the wrists. A very nice priest, I would say, as well, for saying things that might have been against the line. So yeah, dressed up to the nth degree, and that's their indoctrination. Make it shiny, make it look brand new, give them lots of cake when they get communion, at their first Holy Communion, lay on a banquet, and hopefully they won't start questioning the rules. For me, that's the fundamentals, the starting point, I would say. Perhaps.
Looks like Strife is absent for a minute.
Out of action, yeah.
Yeah. Tom said, a guest asked, how do we stop indoctrination?
How do I stop it?
I think it's in education. I think that's, for me, it was critical thinking, skepticism, and a value for evidence, logic, and reason. I mean, if you don't personally value evidence, what evidence can be presented to convince you, and if you, vice versa. The same for logic and reason.
Yeah. That's true. But it's that thing. What do you replace it with? As Board was talking about, you nick the kids' candy. What do you replace it with? It is the same, and it is this kind of what do you call it? The idea of atheism 2.0 or whatever, if we want to believe Alain de Botton.
Well, the really hard thing about it, the really ironic thing about it is kids can handle it much better than adults. I mean, I was so far into fundamentalism. It was my profession, and religion was what I had grown up with. If I had only faced these things when I was a kid, it would have been so much easier. I mean, sure. I mean, these little things like taking the hope of heaven or whatever away, it really doesn't have anything compared to oh shit, all I've ever done was train for the ministry. Now what am I going to do? And my whole life and my kids and my family and everything, my whole life revolving around this, and having to deconvert and risk losing all my friends and alienating me from all my family. And I mean, if I had been able to question as a child, it really would have been a lot easier to handle than doing it when I was almost 30 years old.
Yeah, certainly.
So I would guess that indoctrination just means like you take something, you have to take it as bold face fact, and you're not allowed to question anything.
Well, it's being taught a certain worldview as fact. So you're taught that the Earth was created 6,000 years ago, and that evolution is a lie. Well, that's an indoctrination. it's indoctrinated. It's not true, but you have to believe it because it's part of your belief system. If you say, no, I don't know if that's true, well then, the people involved in your belief system start questioning you, like, well, maybe you really don't believe, and you can't say that's not true, and this is true. You can't say, God didn't create the earth, but Jesus still came, and so you have to believe the whole package, or else they kick you out into the outside.
Isn't there some verses about skepticism in the Bible?
I don't think so.
It's not highly valued. Doubt is pretty much the enemy. A doubting Thomas is really held up as the, everybody looks down on him like, you doubted Jesus was risen, so you're bad.
Wait, but the funny thing is, if I remember the story correctly, I've never actually read the New Testament, but I hear it a lot. That wasn't it like right after Jesus died, everyone was like, oh wait, I don't know this guy, I don't know him, and then.
Well, no, everybody pretty much accepted the story, except, well, they didn't accept it when the women said it, but then when the men started saying it, they did accept it, except for Thomas, who he was known as Doubting Thomas, because he didn't particularly accept. He said, I would have to see him, I'd have to put my hands in the finger in the hole in the hands and in his side, and he was rebuked. When Jesus finally showed up, he's like, you should have just, blessed are they who believe and have not seen, is what the verse says. It's all about faith. It's the antithesis of evidence. It's the opposite of what we should value.
Well, from what I've heard, when a Christian says you're not a true Christian, I think that means if you have doubt, you're not a true Christian by default. You can never have doubt. If right when you have doubt, you're no longer a Christian.
And the ironic aspect of that is that doubt is like our best pathway to knowledge. When we test a claim, when we hear a claim and then we doubt it, we test it, we put it to the test. That is how we make sure of things. Also, how we find things out.
Also, I would say, wouldn't there be a reason for there to be doubt? Because I mean, from that, Satan, temptation and stuff, causing you doubt. So isn't it expected for there to be doubt? But they're like, oh well, I had my tribulations, a time of doubt, but I always found the Lord Jesus Christ and such like that. They always came back. But right when you say, well, I really don't think like that, and then when you go down a path like a slope to atheism or heck another religion, you're like, oh no, you are not a true Christian, because you'd still be a Christian.
Well, what they don't often realize, take into account, is that when the biblical stories, when they're talking about doubt, they're talking about, they didn't have scientific realities per se. They didn't have the scientific method. They didn't have, the resources that we have, or the way of thinking that we can, we have access to. It was competing ideologies, competing worldviews, competing religions, and so you professed your allegiance to one, and doubt then was, there was no good reason to doubt. Now we have scientific realities. We know a lot about evolution. We know a lot about cosmology. We know a lot about the natural history of religion. Where they didn't have these tools back then, and so we get these ancient texts who tell us that doubt is bad, and from their point of view, doubt was kind of bad. But now we've actually got real, tangible evidence that we can turn to and cast out on these religious claims.
Well, isn't there? I think there's an irony because you're told to doubt whatever Satan says because Satan is a liar, right? And there are certain things, well, without a reason to believe in Jesus or without a reason to believe any other claims, what do you have not to believe Satan? You'd have to presuppose faith in anything to have faith in a God or to have faith in anything. Wouldn't you also have to have faith in Satan? Because how do you know which to doubt and which not to doubt?
It's like that whole two doors and telling which one is the liar and which one is the one that tells the truth. How to tell which door is the right door to go through if one lies and one doesn't. It's kind of like asking that question.
Sure.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just going to ask Board your thoughts on the importance of doubt, particularly, I suppose, like young people, etc.
Well, on the indoctrination thing, I think that the best news for America is to look at the UK and Europe. And the simple fact is that religion is literally dying out in the UK. And I mean by that, if you go to church and just look at the congregation, you're looking at people who are retired. There are very few youngsters in the congregation. And the same thing will happen in the US. The same thing's happening with Islam. In the UK, I know lots of Muslims in the UK, and they define themselves as Muslim, but they drink and they smoke and they party and they don't know the Quran. I was actually having a conversation with the guy who, my local shop that I frequent often. Is very expensive, but I like to support the local shop. And it's funny that at Easter, he was confused about Easter. He didn't understand why there was 2 bank holidays. So I was trying to explain to him the Jesus story. And he said, I don't understand that. He said, because we don't have Jesus in Islam. I said, well, no, you do. I said, he's quite an important prophet in Islam. He says, no, we don't. So I'm trying to educate.
Wait. A Muslim who doesn't know who Muhammad is?
He doesn't know Jesus is.
Oh.
So I'm trying to educate a Muslim about the fact that Jesus is actually a prophet, a very important. He's right up there with Moses in Islam, and he says, no, Jesus isn't in. So that's the point. We have, especially with this Boston thing just recently, people have this stereotype of the Muslim. Well, in England, that's not the case. I'm in IT, and I've worked with lots of Indian Muslims, especially, and they are not jihad, effigy burning nutters. They are Muslim, the same as I until quite recently would have called myself C of E, simply because that was what I was baptized as, and it meant nothing more than that. And these people associate themselves as Muslim because that is an identity they give themselves, but they haven't read the Quran in years. They don't subscribe to the dietary requirements. They don't subscribe to non-alcohol, non-cigarettes, or anything like that.
I think
and it's because exposure to the West. Yeah, the West isn't perfect. America, where you can buy democracy, that's not a good thing. Democracy in Europe is not perfect. It's a hell of a lot better than the theocracies or the dictatorships that they have in the Middle East. But we're a long way from where we should be. But they come here and they see the freedom and they grasp it. And the same will happen with their descendants. And when they have a choice between a very poor democracy and a theocracy, they will choose the poor democracy.
Well, the thing about America is, because you were saying it's going to die out in America too, the way you think it's dying out in England, but I don't know if do they have any...
Can we cut you off? Because there's an echo.
Somebody hasn't muted the live feed.
I think it's Vince.
No, I think it's bored. I think it's...
I don't have a live feed. I don't have a live feed.
I think you have lag on Skype, so it's like echoing.
Yeah, that's weird.
How do I get rid of that then?
It comes out of your speakers. Maybe mute your microphone when somebody else is talking.
Or plug in
I think it stopped
some headphones. Yeah,
there we go.
Okay.
Right.
Cool.
Well, anyway, what I was saying is the difference I feel is, like, I don't know if you have Pentecostal type churches in England. Sure, you do?
Yeah.
Well, see, they're like indoctrination factories. They pump out little Christians into the world, and they run amok. I mean, we have ginormous mega churches. I think the biggest in the world. Mega churches are in one is right, like, literally 50 miles away from me. We have a giant mega church, and I even have a mega church not even 5 blocks from me. I mean, they're little indoctrination factories, and they have. It's the same reason that America is probably the most obese country in the world, because McDonald's picked up onto this thing where children like to play, So they have these big churches where there's crazy music going on, adults running around acting like children all the time, and they have people, with their hands in the air, freaking out, running around. So it's a marketing strategy that the same thing the fast food corporations picked up on. That children want to play, and because they have these associative memories. I mean, if you think about reminiscing at all, reminiscing is always superior than the current moment that you're in. When you reminisce about things, you're like, oh, those were the days, and they picked up on that, and it's like a marketing strategy. So it's a really, someone, when they said, how do you stop indoctrination, the best place to start would be with the children, to figure out how to level off those memories from when you're a kid, those positive memories of everyone having a great time at church.
But that will only continue as long as the population's growing, I think, because as soon as the population levels off, then it will be an ever decreasing amount, because some of those children will grow up and become atheists or become agnostic or become realists, and they will then question the efficacy of sending their kids to that same indoctrination, and it then becomes an exponential thing where the attendance will gradually drop off. I mean, the US until very recently was still in very much a growth situation, and of course things like this depression we're going through at the moment, the recession, whatever you want to call it, don't help, because they do draw people back into churches. It's an understandable thing. If you feel under threat, then you go to where you feel comfortable. But I think that it may be a slow progress, but it will be a snowballing effect that these places will gradually die a death. It may be a slow death, but it will be a death.
But the funny thing about that whole thing, what you said about the poor, the people when in a recession would go for the churches and such, right? That's like, ironically, what I've noticed, and actually I read a little figures about it, the least financially, what's the word, financially stable, I guess, people, you could say, they're not in the good range. They're a little bit above poverty. They're barely, though. They're the ones who donate the most to the churches, which I'm curious is an indoctrination thing, because the poor give more to the churches than the rich obviously does, but still, you're making the poor poorer by doing that.
Well, people turn to that kind of thing in their need. I mean, you preach the gospel to the people that are the most needy, because they're the people that need hope the most. And when people don't have any hope anywhere, they'll grab onto it, and that's what they do.
It's the strangest thing too, because for a long time I was just a believer. I wasn't heavily indoctrinated, really. We went to like a semi-Pentecostal church where there were people running around and falling out in the spirit and stuff like that. But I wasn't ever pushed to be religious. Like, once we got home from church, it was that, and the thing that led me away from it is because I kept getting all this paradox from religion that was like, God is all good, and I'd read Bible verses ask and you shall be given. All you have to do, the only criteria is that you believe, and that then it'll be given to you. And the irony in the poor giving to the church and stuff is that I feel like that is what led me out of, because I went through this phase where I hated God first, and then I just stopped believing. And but at first I was like, man, I fucking hate this douchebag, because all these things are happening in my life and none of them are good. And I sit there and I pray in full confidence, because I don't know anybody who sits there and prays and doesn't actually believe that they're speaking to God, right? Like, you have to believe that you're going to get, or you wouldn't be sitting there on your knees before bed with no one else in the room, just praying. So, I thought I had the belief factor covered, so I thought I would get whatever I wanted, and that just led me to not believing it eventually, Well,
the irony is the Bible says that whatever, pray and ask believing, and whatever you ask for, you will receive. I mean, it says it, for crying out loud. I don't know how.
Yeah.
I'm a biblical literalist, dude. I mean, you have to take that literally.
You have to.
And if you sit there and you ask for things and you totally believe in them in church, and they don't just magically appear just like that, what are you supposed to expect?
Well, this confirmation bias comes into play, where you just, you take the things that seem like answers and you throw out the majority of the times that you don't get answers, and you just, well, it has to be true, and it must be something else, and I must not be right with God or something.
It's because you don't believe enough.
Oh, thank
What
you.
what does James think about all that? What do you?
Yeah,
Because
you wanted to say something there.
Well, yeah, I did. I was just about to say. I think you're wrong when it comes to the older denominations. The spiced up Pentecostals, evangelicals, United Reformations rely solely on the modernization of Britain, America, tastes and cultures. More and more, it is a fun time packaged as a God experience. You can do what you normally would, listen to rock music, have a bit of a barbecue if you want to, make friends, but you can also do all of that in the visage of this all-knowing, all-powerful being. That is the package of the New Age indoctrination, particularly for modern American denominations. Now, from a Roman Catholic background, and indeed if you look at very minor Protestant churches have to be one of the smallest denominations in this country nowadays, at least true Protestants, because let's face it, nobody wants to sit in a stone church for hours, on their knees on a stone mantle, talking about some god guy. They want to be at the front, playing the drums, talking about how great this fanatic in the sky is, collecting a bit of money for charity, flipping some burgers, having a barbecue in the sun. Nobody wants to be on their knees in a stone church. And this is gradually almost the same as Roman Catholicism. Roman Catholicism
Oh,
is, sorry, can I?
we
Sorry.
lost Atheist Coffee.
Um, Roman Catholicism is almost getting to be the same in this manner. Yes, it's very Art Deco and it's very aesthetically pleasing, but what it is, it's kind of dull. No, we're getting to the point now where yes, you can have bright colours and bright pictures, etc. Um, but you also do have to do the very Protestant rote learning. But you also do have to do with all the bells and whistles. But you also and what is the best that they can do? Well, the best that my Roman Catholic Church did was a weekend, rainy weekend in Blackpool, which is like a shit seaside town in the north of England. With all the 60-year-old women jumping on that and going off for a day out. That is their answer to new wave tastes and cultures, and it's never going to work. Now, I will say that I think evangelicals, interdenominationals, will survive longer. It is the first to die, Protestants and Roman Catholics, and of course, the new breed of denomination that we're seeing. And by the way, this does not just apply to Christianity. I believe this to be true amongst many Muslim communities as well. I'm not so sure about Sikhism, but Muslim communities definitely. But this new also culture of cults and needless extremism. I need not mention the Westboro Baptist Church, though I will. But they have more news coverage than the Roman Catholic Church has since Pope Francis, became Pope, etc. In those short weeks, because of total extremism, which will get a following. I don't want to name names, but I could go outside and start saying that I am Christ, appeal to those that are weaker of mind, indoctrinate them, make them believe that I'm worth believing in, and then, hey ho, 200 people later, I have a cult. It's really intriguing. But I think that's the main thing. The bells and whistles are there. I've fallen over because I'm so indoctrinated. I'm still so full of the love of Christ or whatever. But it's going to be the ones. Some are lagging behind, and those will be the first to die.
Now, I mean, this might be an absurd claim to make, but I wouldn't be amazed if a religious fundamentalist, like an evangelical, am I coming in okay?
You're quiet.
Ugh, I fucking hate this mic.
I mean, I can hear you, but I don't know how it
Well,
is on stream.
well, but yeah, but pretty much, um, I'm saying, well, I bet an evangelicalist, or someone who would say it,
That's better.
would say, um, well, your science and your critical thinking is getting them away from Christ, and they would say that it's indoctrination for them.
Um, yeah.
The reason it's not indoctrination
No, 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 but
is
from their perspective, not ours.
it doesn't. Well, like okay, from their perspective, yeah. But where are you going for this, Strife? You want to have commentary
I'm
on it.
playing. I'm playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, in that situation,
Just sorry,
in
just
the
as
situation that someone comes to you and tells you, or comes to anyone, like if you ever get the opportunity, all you have to do is say that science can be proven wrong. It's not
uh,
so. There is no indoctrination factor.
just as we um, as the atheist community will forever say that the burden of proof lies with those trying to distill it. The mode and tenor of indoctrination lies solely with those being indoctrinated. I don't think it even matters in the slightest if the indoctrinators, the Catholics and the Christians, I don't really care if they believe that they're not indoctrinating people. The point is that they are, because it lies with those they're indoctrinating. That's simply not even worth kind of debating. In fact, I even believe Roman Catholicism in particular to now becoming rather self-aware about its indoctrination. The new Pope has kind of changed his ways. He's trying to look a lot cheaper, if you will. He's trying to look like he gave up the throne and all the fancy gold clothes and that kind of thing, because he realizes that that's an icon for appeal, and people are getting kind of nosy towards the Vatican, and they're beginning to kind of click that maybe they're being brainwashed into doing something. Whether the same for that, I do have an anecdote about an evangelical church, but I think I'll save it for a bit. I don't want to talk too much. Um, I do think that's what's happening, though. I think some churches are becoming, as you were saying, Strife, self-aware of their indoctrination, if that's at all what you meant. But I don't think. I think the indoctrinated uphold the right to decide who's indoctrinating them.
Well, I would agree that it seems like to me the Catholic Church is becoming a minor, like they're not the ones that you hear are doing the most harm. The most harm that you would most likely hear are like I mean I heard from a few episodes back. If you watch the other show episodes of this, Stein schools. You ever heard of that, James?
Yes,
Like
yes,
they were teaching kids that fire gnomes
fine.
cause a I forget, a candle fire, I think it was, or something, and they were
Yeah,
doing mantras about to praise the fire gnomes, which
mm,
is completely bullshit,
yes.
and that's an example of indoctrination. I mean, because anybody in their right mind would
Um,
know.
The point is that you would not be able to, if a teacher at school was to tell children shit that had no basis in reality and could be not backed up with evidence, they would be kicked out. But stick a collar around their neck and call it religion, and they can just tell a kid any shit they want and damn them to hell for all eternity, and they're not called up on it. That's what amazes me.
yes. Mm.
Yes, that too.
Well, the thing is that any claim like the only difference between a scientific worldview and a religious worldview is that it doesn't need evidence. And when you say a claim like what were you talking about, the something starting fires or something? What
Fire
is
gnomes.
that?
Stein
Fire
schools in
gnomes.
Britain. There's a Stein school in Britain that Paul C. Hartley showed me a link to. It's on the episode called Fire Gnomes of Britain and Canada. Um, it's a link to actual teacher, I think, or actual students were actually being taught that fire gnomes are what cause fire,
Right.
and they're
Well,
and they're
see,
doing mantras and stuff to make it work and stuff, which is complete utter, you know, I don't get it.
yeah. Well, that's the thing. Well, the mantras obviously are irrelevant, and that's something that you can test on your. That's something you can test on your own. But if these are like ethereal fire gnomes or whatever, science could be open to the possibility that there are fire gnomes controlling the fire. The only idea is that you'd have to develop a hypothesis and a way to test it. So
But the
not the thing about like science is that not all worldviews or not all claims are immediately false. You know, they have to have rigorous testing, and until there's enough testing to say that there is fire gnomes that are causing it, then there's no reason to believe it, and that's why science has kind of an apathetic view
well,
towards superstition.
like I'm just saying that we know with a great amount of certainty of how fire works. You know, like the fire triangle, the basic thing. You need oxygen, you need a fuel source, and you need a oh god, what's the last piece of it? Uh,
Heat.
yeah, heat. That's it, heat. You need those three components to make fire. This has nothing to do
Right.
with has nothing to do with some
Electric
kind of
auto fuel.
what? What? What'd you say? Did you just mute yourself?
Oh yeah, I might have done. No, auto fuel. They use in torpedoes. Doesn't require oxygen. It produces its own. But
Okay, but still, pretty much we know how fire works.
Yeah.
Heck, we've been using fire for like I think like pretty much since Homo sapiens has been around. You know, like we know our ancestors had fire. So,
Yeah, but
since
but
God
that's
set
kind of-
fire to the first bush, I think.
That's not. I don't think that's wholly useful though. Like, yes, we all know that fire is, you know, that we know the science behind the fire, but that doesn't change the fact that there are people, genuine people, trying to teach kids that fire gnomes are starting fires. That's the matter in hand. The matter in hand is not that we know the truth, because if that was the case, then we would have won this war about 100 years ago with Thomas Paine and the likes. You know, we would have done that.
I think the question is, how do we get these kind of people to value evidence?
Yeah, but
this is the thing though, where they're targeting children who, I mean,
But
maybe this.
children understand evidence. I
Well,
think
no,
that's
but I mean, but at a certain age, they begin to understand that. But I would say young, like like maybe 5, 6, they haven't exactly developed the skills required because I think like this might be stupid, but I think I believed in Pokemon were real when I was 5. Like I thought they were real. I mean, I was like really young though. Pokemon came out. Like I thought they were real.
yeah, but that's a frivolity. That's not indoctrinated.
No, but
Content.
I'm just saying like you don't develop the critical thinking skills until you're older. When you're like that young, you could make the kid believe in anything. You can make him believe. You can make him believe
I
fairies
don't think it
exist.
is about. I don't think it's so much about the children really. I think it's when they're a little bit older. I think let the children believe in tooth fairies and all the rest of it. They've got to develop these skills, and there is I know nothing about it, but there is neuropsychology that the brain develops in stages for a reason. You need to believe at an early stage because you need to accept information and you need to take it as gospel, if that's the right word. And then during your teenage years, especially for the male, you need to be quite aggressive and very risk or non-risk averse because there are evolutionary reasons for that. And it's only around the age of parenting, which 20 or so, that your brain solidifies into the state it's going to be. And the children, you can't really address what they do. It's more the mothers. I mean, in England, tens of thousands, allegedly, parents subject their female children to genital mutilation every year. And so what is it in an adult that having gone through it themselves, wants to subject their child to
Well,
that.
you know, I recognized after my deconversion there are these mechanisms within fundamentalism that through various means coerce and guilt people within the group back into the group. There are coercion mechanisms, guilt mechanisms that the people themselves enforce upon each individual in the group. So if one individual somehow falls out of line, if there's, say, a dress standard, and one individual starts saying, well, I don't understand this dress standard. I don't agree that, you know, women should cover up because they have a responsibility for men's minds. The rest of the group will perpetuate this coercion, this guilt upon this other one, and there's this internal consistency and coercion from each person in the group that pulls people back in line, or if they won't come back in line, pushes them out of the group.
I mean,
And,
it seems like to me, like, for example, like, okay, this might be a stupid example, but Eric Hovind. Like, I actually, because I think I could tell he was indoctrinated, but when the kid in the audience, if everyone's seen the video with the 6th grader telling him, you know, that presuppositional argument was crap, pretty much.
Yeah, I have that.
Pretty much, you could tell in his head he was having some kind of monologue that he was doing mental gymnastics, trying to figure out a way out of this without trying to push himself out of his indoctrination. He was trying to keep consistent. He's like, so he went to the only route he did, attacking the kid, which is the only way out of it, I guess.
When you're trying to hold up your own belief system, you have to at all costs. I mean, you're convinced that you have the right answers. You're convinced that your beliefs are correct. And so when somebody comes along with an argument, even if the argument is very convincing and seems to be definitive, it has to be wrong. And so you approach it as if it's wrong. You don't critically examine it. You just assume it's wrong and try to figure out some way to explain how it's wrong, because that's how a belief system survives. That's, you know, when it's against the evidence.
That is the same with any belief. I mean, you know, not just religious. If you take a position on absolutely anything at all, if you're in a one-to-one conversation with somebody, then it's very easy that you can talk it out. But again, on the YouTube, like the comments section, if somebody says what you've said, it's your automatic reaction is to defend what you said, and it actually takes an act of will to think, well, I'm not instantly going to start typing and reply to this person. I'm going to consider what they said and try and think, do they have a valid point, and do I need to adjust my thinking, and maybe I'm thinking wrong. This is internal conflict resolution. If you hold a position and your position is anything at all, the Boston Marathon bombing, if you think, well, if you take a position that wasn't a terrorist attack, that was a personal thing that these people went off the rails and they did it. If somebody comes to you and says, no, it was definitely a terrorist attack, your instant reaction will be to defend your position that you've placed, that no, it isn't a terrorist attack. And that's totally natural, because what this person's done is they've said something which counters a belief which you hold, which that creates a conflict resolution in your head. Your head doesn't like conflict resolutions, it wants to resolve it. Now, you've got two ways of resolving it, which is to change the way you think or to defend yourself. Whichever way you do, you'll get a little dopamine injection into your brain afterwards saying, well done you, pat on the head. But it's the automatic reaction is to defend your position every time.
Yeah, and I found in the last
and when
few
you have
years...
a religious...
Go ahead.
No, that's it. That's all I was going to say.
Okay. I found in the last few years since my deconversion, the realization of exactly that, because you're always defending your position. You're always looking to make converts because you're right, but they're wrong, or they're not as right as you. And to get to the point where you can say, I don't know, and somebody can come to you and say, well, you're actually incorrect about that, and you can accept it. And you can say, okay, I'm fine. I'm fine with being wrong. That, I think, is the intellectual position. I think that's the position where you can learn stuff. You can become more intelligent. It's kind of the beginning of knowledge is being able to say, I don't know, and realize you don't know, or be able to accept that others know a lot of stuff. I find that on my videos, my subscribers post and say, you got that wrong, you got this wrong, or whatever. And it's great because I can now say, oh, that's cool, that's awesome, I was wrong. People are smarter than me. And that's great because I used to be exact opposite. I would just defend my position no matter what. I know I'm right. I know what. That's a ridiculous position.
Yeah. I wanted to. Someone said presupposition again. This is this kind of word that it's been floating around recently, and I've been thinking about it a lot. The philosophical position of presupposition, etc. And this is indoctrination incarnate. You are presupposing that what someone's telling you is true, if we're going to connect it to a religious foundation, etc. But in linguistics, a presupposition is simply, the implication of information. So either through metonymy or whatever modality, etc. You would make a point. If I say to you, things were different before 2001. You all know I'm talking about September the 11th, 2001, etc. Things were different before then and after then. You're assuming the information, and in that regard, that's how religions have come to fruition, I suppose. You just presuppose that the person who's talking to you is right because they're so enthusiastic about something. That is the chief tool of indoctrination. Simple enthusiasm, something you'll never be able to damper, which is the someone asked how we stop indoctrination. You will never will because of that, because of the innate ability to be enthusiastic about something, presumably. And no, you should never take away from that. But what we can do is begin to show more of the positives of atheism. This is the massive flaw I see in this community right now. We've done the shouting and the screaming and the evolution is correct, evolution is the standard, etc. I feel like we've done, the religious fanatics are still out there, they're declining in numbers. I feel like that section, that part is over. Now it's working to show a certain enlightenment, show an enlightening view of enlightenment, if you will, and that will involve, in some manner, a form of, well, you can call it indoctrination if you will, or but kind of a meta almost in giving children the option. Yes, that is something that needs to be done, but also simply, I don't think it's at all evil or abhorrent to begin advertising the benefits of a free-thinking life. I don't think that it should be done in a bang on your door, come outside, I want to tell you all about my opinion kind of way. But I don't think it's too obtuse to just start being a little more open about the good things that we can, whether you want to do it by this London Sunday gathering thing that they're doing right now in London, where you can go along on a Sunday and you sing some songs and there's some speakers and you just celebrate being a free thinker. Whether you want to do it that way or you want to do it in just, we're free thinkers and we're doing this thing and it's kind of fun. It's our duty to lead the way in changing people's perceptions into the new world. That's.
I envy you that position that you live in a place where you feel that battle is over, that battle of education, of convincing people.
Well, yes, I didn't. I guess that's the problem with my argument, really, that in America it is well and truly still alive.
The problem in America is that the public is the people that need to know the information the most, while the scientists they've been done with this issue for over 150 years. Heck, in Britain, it's been 150 years. I think it was the great debate in Cambridge Hall. I think it was with Richard
Huxley.
and Owens. Yeah, Huxley and Owens. And Huxley and is that the guy who said, if your great-great-grandfather was a monkey? And Huxley said pretty much, so the fuck what, pretty much. That's just paraphrasing, but pretty much, it was a stupid question.
Well, I mean, it amazes me. I go from from here, from this kind of environment. I talk to people that I'm related to or that are very good friends with. I care about, and when I say things about evolution, when I say things about cosmology, they look at me as if I'm claiming the moon is made of cheese. I mean, like I've absolutely lost my mind, and it's just absolutely an incredible thing to have to deal with.
Yeah.
The thing about indoctrination is, I think, and I think this is what presuppositionalists have caught on to. I think the biggest hammer you can bring against it is not evidence or not valuing evidence, but I would say it's something like epistemology or some sort of philosophy, because you come to a point, and this is just in my personal experience, all my nieces lived with their grandmother on their father's side for the better part of their life, 3 years, and so they're only, the oldest is 6, so most of the time they spent, and I shattered their indoctrination instantaneously, and that was only asking them questions. That was only questioning them about how they know what they know, and why do they believe that. And if I told them, I give them absolutely absurd examples, just completely absurd examples, and I ask them if they believe me, and then they say no, and I say why? Because I presented it as if it were absurd, and then you present the idea that they're indoctrinated with as if it's absurd too, and then I feel like that's the best way with children to stop indoctrination. With adults, I don't know, because of what Bob DeBitz was saying there. When your initial instinct is to fight back, but with a certain sort of inquisition, there is no instinct to fight back. There is just the strong urges to evaluate your position first. Instead of making statements and presenting facts, which is what science does, it's like, okay, this is the facts, deal with it. And then you have people go into denial saying, no.
That is a very interesting point. It's the same with governments. Do governments fail or do oppositions win? You know what I mean? Maybe with adults, like you said, it's going to take church failure, like I was saying, once the cracks begin to show. Once the perfect kind of halcyon, area that the church gives you, once those cracks begin to show, is that what the adults will need to realise that actually it's not as great as it was? Will it take a tyrannic pastor going mental, and screaming at children, beating children? What is it going to take? I fear that in perhaps America in particular, churches have to fail. We can't help them.
It's not enough.
The problem though.
It's not enough.
The problem.
I've seen. There's so many pastors that I know who have exactly that: abused children, committed suicide. I mean, It doesn't matter. You just the believers write it off as isolated cases. Oh, this guy failed us.
Exactly.
The problem.
What happens is, the reason you can talk to children is because they can ask why. They want to know why. They don't have this deeply ingrained need to believe, where an adult has to protect their belief system, and so they can't face the same questions and look at the consequences honestly of asking the questions, just like a child could.
The kid is still developing its worldview, while the adult already has one.
The kid isn't dependent on their belief system for
I didn't say. I know. I understood that. I said they're developing it. They're not exactly there yet.
Well, that's the point. A 7-year-old kid can be an absolute devout believer on Tuesday, and on Wednesday be a scientist.
Yeah.
Because they have that flexibility.
When it gets older, though, they'll be less flexible. They either have to stick
there is a period. I think I think it's probably the period of puberty or whatever. Where through to 13, maybe 12, 13 through to 17, where they become that, the militant, angry child that we all go through, or we all went through at that stage, where, you don't understand the world and you're looking for meaning, and I hate everyone, I hate my parents and everything else. that's when the real dangerous indoctrination happens, I think.
Well, I mean, from what I've seen, it seems like to me that the whole the reason they go for kids, like, Jesus Camp, like that was an extreme case, I would say, like an extreme case, which
Well, you know that the irony about that is the reason that children are indoctrinated is because parents care about them, because they really believe there's a heaven and there's a hell,
yes,
and they want to ingrain it early so that their child has the best chance of going to heaven. I mean, indoctrination is not this malicious thing where these people are like, yeah, I'm going to make them hate
yeah,
homework.
yeah.
I want them to go to heaven, and I don't want them to go to hell. And it's loving parents that do it out of love. We have we have it kind of backwards a lot of times.
Well, yes, they do it out of love and compassion for their children. They think, oh, well, they'll be saved, so I'll see them in my afterlife or something like that. But in the long run, they're, in a sense, they're causing a vicious cycle of repeat. In a sense, the kid will then
You bring them back into the belief system and everything that goes along with it. We got this. We talked about all the harm that it can do, the hatred for other groups, the discrimination against homosexuals, the the labeling of everybody. All these people are going to hell and they're evil and they're of Satan and everything. And
Well, I was thinking most recently, like, I consider myself excommunicated from the Catholic Church. But the bishop still doesn't think so. The bishop still thinks I'm a bloody Catholic, So I thought I want them to acknowledge that I've left,
How do you
So
do that?
I'll write him a letter, which you're supposed to do, and I'll get excommunicated. However, I started thinking, my grandmother is still alive, and she got me baptized. She took me to church every Sunday for 8 years. She got me into altar serving. Do I want to really break her by doing that to her? She knows that she knows I'm not religious anymore, certainly, but I'm sure she still thinks I'm just a secular Catholic still, But really, I would very much like to excommunicate myself. But even now, it's permeating my thought process. Do I want to bring guilt and, by extension, shame into my family?
The thing that's amazing me is, like, you're indoctrinated. The people who are extreme Catholics, I would say, if the word extreme Catholic is a word, that excommunicated is like they're never gonna speak to me again. It's like invisible. It's like a barrier. Like there's an invisible barrier blocking you from them. Yeah, you can still talk to them, but they won't talk.
That is the case. I don't want them to talk to me. Trust me, I really don't. I really don't.
Oh, you don't? Oh, but I'm just saying, like, I'm saying what it used to be. I'm saying what it used to be, not now. I mean, and not your case.
The clergy, I don't want to talk to me anymore. I want my grandmother to talk to me. She makes me cake, and that kind of thing. I still want her to talk to me. But you see that, like, if I wasn't a little bit indoctrinated, I would have just said fuck it. I will now just become completely excommunicated. I will send him a letter. But I'm still thinking I don't want to break my grandmother. And part of that is still distilled by this endless teaching that perhaps I'll end up in a pretty bad place if I disrupt any of the teachings taught. You know what I mean? And that kind of thing. So.
You guys want to hear something funny?
But your grandmother knows you're going to hell anyway, so what are you worried about?
Well, no, but that's I guess that's the flip side. Yeah, I don't like to get too anecdotal, but that's, I think, a good example. And also, if we want to look at the extreme cases, and once again, I hate to even use them because I think they're overused in an analogy, but the Westboro Baptist Church,
Well, did you hear what they did to their child?
A young lady would leave the family and leave the church, but would have to do it with a massive amount of courage. A girl brought up in a commune, which is arguably more dangerous, completely isolated for many years, without seeing these, the kind of rougher sides of society. A massive amount of courage to get up and walk away, having known that perhaps it's morally wrong.
Well,
that is really ballsy. That's the massive bit, I think.
Well, I mean, like, did you hear about the case with the girl who pretty much, they brought her to a hotel, they gave her enough money to stay for one night, and, like, well, you have to find somewhere to live in 24 hours.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And they didn't give her any more money, anything else. They pretty much just said, like, pretty much that's like excommunicated, like, even more than what Catholics I don't think would do. I don't think Catholics would go that far. Do you think?
No, not in this day and age either.
Yes, that's
And that's like me and Board were talking about. You know, it's just not as extreme in Britain anymore. They wouldn't do that to you, but that's what I guess what Atheist Coffee was saying. You know, that it's still raging in America, and the need to kind of distill this indoctrination, especially in schools, it seems as well, is still absolutely necessary. You know.
I think if you leave the church in England, some people will stop sending you Christmas cards.
That's a heavy price to pay.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, like I was saying earlier, I think the best weapon anybody has against the type of indoctrination is questioning, and I'll refer to this to someone who's been indoctrinated his whole life and decided to be secular anyway. Is my dad. He's like a secular kind of Christian. He's just a believer, you know. And he doesn't believe in everything, you know. And whenever someone brings up a contradiction in the Bible, like, you know, my dad loves bacon, but whenever I tell him, you know, hey, you know, you're not supposed to eat bacon. That's unclean meat. You know what I'm talking about? And he says, well, you know, if I have I'll have to answer to God to that. You know, I'll go. You know, that's part of my judgment. You know, I'll talk to God about that when I get there or whatever. But through a sort of inquisition, which is the best tool, I feel, I got my dad to admit agnosticism. And it was funny because, you know, he was saying I know God exists, and I kept prodding and prying and saying, how do you know? And then bringing up other examples. Well, if you just absolutely know, and there's no constituent that means that you're absolutely right, then what everybody absolutely knows is also absolutely right, you know. And he got down to saying it, and eventually he was like, well, you're right, I don't 100% know that God exists. And I was like, ha, you know, like I pointed at, like, you know, like there it is, man. And that's all I want you to admit. I don't care, because I feel like once you concede that you're not absolutely certain of your position, then you know, you have no reason to enforce it on other people.
Well, those that claim that absolute certainty are lying. I mean,
Right.
it's a biblical thing as well. I mean, Jesus doubted. The Apostle Paul said, "If Christ be not raised, our faith is in vain." They all had doubts.
That's the point that I pretty much said. That pretty much I heard that.
Everybody has doubts.
Well, yes. But
Nobody
God
is 100%
doesn't.
certain.
But God doesn't for some reason, which is kind of funny because Jesus said, "Why, Father, have you forsaken me?" Meaning Jesus doubted something because he thought, because he's God, so he would know. Well, I don't know if the whole Trinity thing makes no sense to begin with. But
Well, yeah. Why was he whining in the Garden of Gethsemane? You know,
That is a
it was
huge
him.
plus.
He was killing himself. It was, you know, what was he
Boy,
whining about there? Who was he praying to?
if he was certain of what was going to happen, why would he say, "Father, why have you forsaken me? Oh wait, I'm going to die. I'm going to be resurrected." You know, he would have known that. But it sounds like no, he didn't know jack.
Board, you want to hear something funny that correlates to your position earlier? Right as I told my dad, I was like, so you admit it, you don't know, you're not 100% certain. I was like, okay, you admit it. And then immediately, right after I said that, he was just like, no, I know.
No, I know. He's like Seitan Bernbeck. He's like, I know because God's real with me away. I'm certain of it. Do you think that was indoctrinated in him, or he just came up with that shit himself? Honestly, what do you think?
Who's Sai?
Who?
Yeah, I had a friend who I watched my videos and they started off with I believe, and I talked to them and they were sensible and they talked about it. And at the end of quite a few conversations over a period of weeks, they said, "Oh no, I accept everything you say. There is, you know, they hadn't read the Bible. Yeah, I accept that it's all rubbish and all the rest of it, but I still believe in heaven." I said, "Well, what do you mean you still believe in heaven?" "Well, because I'm going to meet my dad there."
Yeah.
So, yeah, everything you say is true. The Bible's rubbish. There's no proof of God or anything else, but I'm going to continue believing in heaven because I want to. and they were absolutely honest about it. Their need for belief was more important than anything else.
That's pretty much the position of my mum, to be honest. Like, doesn't go to church or anything, but needs that belief that perhaps there's something more to keep her going, even though she has pretty much succumbed to everything I've told her about, the joys of the free experience, etc. I wanted to tell, if I may, a little short story about an experience I had at an evangelical event.
Go ahead.
At this particular event, it was a friend that I had at the time, an acquaintance, I should say. And this acquaintance, they were kind of on the fringe of this evangelical church. And, he invited us to go along to this Christian rock night. That's what it was. It was labelled as a Christian rock night. So I thought, I'm not doing anything, what the fuck, let's do it, And there were quite a lot of people from my, place, and I'd been to Christian rock gigs before. At this stage, I'd say I was just about completely agnostic, leaning towards atheism. And while I'm doing this, I go into the place, and it's not like any other Christian rock gig I've ever been to before. There are tables. It's not just like stand at the front with the band. There are tables and a tablecloth and a buffet, and I quickly realised this is some kind of shit disguised gig. Do you know what I mean? Dressed up.
It's a front. It's a front.
Yeah, so I sat down and I was like, oh god, what is this? Anyway, the show started. Various people singing and stuff. There was some okay bits, but the majority of it was very kind of half-assed, depressing people that couldn't really sing a note, and it was very dull, and that kind of thing. And I sat there through the whole thing, and it was okay though, because I thought at least they're not giving me a fucking sermon. At least that's not happening. At least I'm not in church right now. At least there's a bit of music. There's some drums. There's a guitar. There's an electric keyboard. Whatever. At least there's something keeping me from total damnation. Excuse the pun. Anyway, end of the show comes, and this South African woman gets up and says, I want to say a few words, if I may. And she started talking about how she was in Johannesburg during the segregation, and how she was there, and her father was killed, and she was stood in the courtroom, and and the guy who killed her father was in the dock. And when they asked her if she had any words for him, she said, I forgive you. And this was supposedly kind of, because God was in her. God allowed...
That's the most stupidest thing I ever heard anyone say.
God allowed her to forgive this man who'd killed her father. And what she did was, she went, okay guys, I want you to close your eyes, and I just want you to join your hands in prayer with me. And of course I didn't, and I just kept my eyes open. And then she said, she did this, she wasn't a vicar or anyone, she said, and tell me, when you've accepted God in your heart, put your hand up, okay? I'm not even kidding. So 30 seconds she gave us to accept God, basically. And nobody put their hand up, except for like a few hardcore Christians put their hands up and that kind of thing. And then at the end of the 30 seconds, she just opened her eyes and said, it's okay, you can come and tell me afterwards if you actually did accept God. She wasn't a vicar or anything, just this random woman doing that. My point is, indoctrination is definitely not sacrosanct to members of the clergy. Members of the church are seemingly getting involved as well. And I saw this quite a lot in Roman Catholicism as well. A couple of kind of satellite ministers who had no affiliation with the clergy, but they would kind of, sneak in a word or in your ear or someone else's ear and that kind of thing. It can come from anywhere. And this is what I'm saying. This was when I first realised that it's definitely now being dressed up for modern audiences. That event was specifically designed to attract people exactly like me. And that is scary, I think,
They're becoming more... But I mean, like, the thing that's kind of funny is she forgave the guy, but I bet the guy still took time for the crime.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
That's how I was like thinking. I was like, okay, so what the fuck forgave him? The court judges the person of what he did. It's not really what she's like. Wait, does that work there? Like, if the person forgives the person who did the crime, does that mean the guy gets off scot-free? I don't think so.
No, well, exactly, yeah. It's just that it can come from anywhere, and this is the permeation from the top. It permeates the followers, and then it permeates the kids, and there's got to be a blockage put in between one of these phases. Unfortunately, I think definitely. That's the end of my tale.
Any comments?
No.
No, I think that's but that comes down a bit of, I think what she was probably hoping for was that people would go, yeah, I believe now.
Yeah.
Because this is sort of this revivalist type mentality. I watched a video, I don't know how old it is, I think it's only a couple of years older than most, about the miracle in Cairo. I don't know if you've heard of this one.
Oh,
The KFC miracle.
yeah, I think so.
Where one of these nutters women, I can't remember her name, went out and they were doing this thing in Cairo. And actually, I think it was 2008. And I believe at the time there was only one KFC in Cairo. I think there's 3 now, because I did boringly go and check it. But apparently they'd organised meals for everybody. And she claimed something ridiculous amount, like, can't remember how many it was. But they'd ordered 3,500 meals. Now,
Jeez.
imagine a single KFC in any major city producing 3,500 meals for a lunchtime. But then extra people had turned up, and so all the meals came from KFC, and they handed them all out, and everyone had run out, and they went back into the kitchen, and another 1,200 had appeared.
So she's saying that food spontaneously appeared.
In KFC boxes with napkins and salt shakers. I mean, God does his job.
Yeah, God with a service and smile.
It's right, fuck the kids in Ethiopia. We've got people in Cairo to give KFCs to.
That's like I could imagine that happening, like maybe like the same story, because I've actually heard a similar story where someone says, like, I seen food in my refrigerator multiply. I'm like, if you have film of this spontaneous combustion of food.
What about the starving children who die every day? Well, why doesn't their food multiply?
I think God only gives a shit to the people who have stuff to give.
That goes back to the very origin of religion. Don't be in central London saying that your KFC's multiplied. Go to Egypt, a place that's that at the time, I presume, was politically war-torn, where the call to prayer is still citywide. Go there. Go to the place that is still fundamentally religious. Bring it to Denmark or one of the Scandinavian states, and we'll see how long it lasts.
The miracles that are always claimed are silly things. They're nothing that matters to anybody. Oh, I found my car keys. I got a parking space at Walmart. I mean, seriously, what about a big thing? Nobody ever. Well, there is no.
Yeah, God doesn't do big things anymore. Remember. Remember the last big thing God did was Jesus, supposedly, and he fed, I think, like 500 people, or was it like 5,000 people with like 3 loaves of bread? I think it was, right?
But your point board is like, yeah, I get it. Those events are used then, as evidence for the indoctrination, and they all jump out of the closet when these things happen, and pounce on you. I think they need to be kind of refuted with all the gusto of a political movement, to do that kind of thing, to stop that indoctrination. I think.
We just lost. What the heck just happened?
I think we lost Board.
Yeah, Bard. What happened to your camera?
No, we completely lost him.
No, but he's back.
Oh, he is.
I think he's back. Are you back, Bard?
I added him.
Am I back?
Yeah, but we don't see you.
Welcome back. Well, he's
If you guys want to hear something funny,
There you go.
That you were talking about how the miracles are never spectacular. I drive to work in the morning, and I listen to the jazz channel most of the time because I don't have an MP3 player in my car. And then two stations up is the hardcore Christian channel, the Creationist Christian channel.
Oh, goody.
And yeah, so if they're not playing jazz at the moment, or some song I don't like comes on, I'll flip to two channels up to see what the netters are saying, right? And so I'll listen to them, and it was exactly what Atheist Coffee said, man. You know, the pastor's like, oh, someday I'll be running low on $20, and I'll be flipping through a Bible page, and all of a sudden there's $20. Like,
oh, wait. I actually heard this from a foreigner. This guy was from Korea. This is my story. This guy was from Korea. He told me that he couldn't get money to go to Puerto Rico, I think it was, on a missionary thing. And he's like, his mom sent him a few $100s to do it. I'm like, and he's like, Jesus did it. I'm like, your mom fucking phoned you the money. What's so spectacular about that? And okay.
They'll always say, well, God can do the big things, but he's also the God of the little things. And I say, well, when has he ever done the big things? I mean, it's just, well, no, he can grow limbs back. He just chooses not to.
You know what will make me believe in God, honestly? If God actually helped a fucking animal. If he helped a fucking animal, that would be impressive.
Mm.
Because you think of that. He only helps humans.
Something I've always pondered on is when the indoctrination reaches its kind of phase 3, if you will. You know, God works in mysterious ways is the byline of when you've run out of everything else to indoctrinate with. And my response to that is always the same. I'm a literature and language student. On Tuesday, I have a presentation to do on a project that I'm doing on opinion pieces in journalism. Now, if I went to that presentation and I got at the front, okay, and I stripped off completely naked and covered myself in the blood of a cow, okay, and I got a few like sticks together and I just held them like that and just started pole dancing in the middle of the room while screaming moo. Okay.
Wait, what?
And then I sit down. Wait, and then I sit down. The lecturer gives me a first, gives me an A star, and everybody's like, why do you give him an A star? And my lecturer just goes, he works in mysterious ways. It's okay. He works in the message is still there. He just works in mysterious ways. He did something. I got it. It was edgy. You know, we've seen it on all those shows where, you know, something accidental happens and everybody loves it. It's in The Man with Two Left Feet by P.G. Woodhouse. You know, a guy bumbles on stage, he falls over, and the crowd love it. That's it. That's the nail in the coffin as far as I'm concerned. That is not, you know, reason to indoctrinate people. God works in mysterious ways.
It's an excuse to...
But they've realised this, and this is where KFC bargain bucket multiplication comes in. This is where all these fad miracles come in, because that byline is becoming redundant, you know, and that's the main thing. All the ideas, all the methods of indoctrination are becoming redundant slowly, and I think that's what we just have to hope for in one way or another, to be honest.
When you say that, I immediately think of like abstract art. When you say say that thing, you're just like, oh, the message is there. I got it. You know, it reminds me of like.
Well, you've just said that. You know, the Tate Gallery in London did something where they've got a Picasso there, and they hung it upside down for a whole month. For a month they did that. And nobody noticed. Nobody noticed that this painting was upside down, and everybody went up to it and looked at it and kind of observed it in its beauty and its, you know, and that's it. Nobody will really notice, and nobody, especially in religious communities, will do the right thing and question these ridiculous focuses, you know, like bargain bucket multiplication or whatever. You know, that's the fact.
Well, miracles are the most hilarious thing. The miracles, I mean, every saint has to have miracles, and I was just trying to look up, and I can't remember his name, but there's a very famous Jesuit saint who did a lot of work, and I can't even remember in which century it was. It was early on, but he did a lot of work in India and China, and he's very famous for it. And he was actually beatified or given his sainthood by the same Pope who condemned Galileo. But he's well known and well attested because he and his entourage wrote lots and lots and sent all this stuff back to Rome, and it's been written down in books and it's available for people to read. But and the key thing from all his writings, and he wrote about the mystics in India and about the pagan religions in China, but nowhere in any of his writings or any of his entourage's writings was there any mention anywhere of any miracles. And then he died, and he had to be beatified.
Well, that's like
So
that's
suddenly
like that's like Mother Teresa. Like Mother
And
Teresa.
then the miracles appeared. One story which he actually wrote about was he was on a boat, and I can't remember if it was India or China, and he lost his crucifix over the side of the boat, and he was sad about this. Well, one of his miracles was that after he dropped his crucifix over the side, a crab brought it back to him. And that was one of his miracles. But he never mentioned it at the time, but apparently afterwards there was loads of witnesses to this happening.
Yeah.
But you'd have thought that might have been the sort of thing he'd have mentioned in one of his letters back to Rome, wouldn't it?
It's funny you say that. I don't know if anybody knows where the term devil's advocate comes from, but it comes from the Vatican. And it doesn't exist anymore, but it did. When they were picking a new saint, they would have one of the cardinals play Advocate Diable. The office
Christopher
of the-
Hitchens was the devil's advocate in regards to Mother Teresa's hearing at the Vatican.
Yeah.
He was
yeah,
he was pro bono or some shit like that.
Pro bono.
Exactly. The office of the devil's advocate. Yes.
Yes.
And this is the case of Mother Teresa. But this is what I find fundamentally interesting. It doesn't exist anymore. But at the time, you know, when half of the room, well, all of the room except for one, were trying to make a case for somebody becoming a saint, one person was giving the opposite argument. They know it's bullshit. You know what I mean? This person would say, oh, but that might be fake. Or this person did this, or this person questioned their faith, or this person got money with Mother Teresa, for example, through dubious means. You know, that's the thing that I find most interesting, and that is the same in many other denominations, that they know the arguments against the case. At least the very serious intellectuals amongst them do. It's scarcely harnessed, though. That's the issue I always run into, you know, I guess.
Well, Joan of Arc is probably the epitome of that. I mean, Joan of Arc was basically a witch as far as the Roman Catholic Church was concerned. She was a heretic and a witch, but she was popular. So she stayed a heretic and a witch for a while, and then the Roman Catholic Church thought, well, she's popular, let's turn her into a saint. You know, absolutely arbitrarily.
Yeah.
She's a saint?
Yeah, Joan of Arc.
Didn't know that. I just knew that she was a famous person and supposedly talked to God and stuff. That's the only thing I know.
She was a witch. She was burnt as a witch, but then became a saint, as witches do.
True that. Very good. I think I was going to talk about something else, but I've
Well, we possibly have a theist coming on.
forgotten it.
Do we? Oh, I'm excited.
Well, he's actually a moderator on a chat room.
Oh. All right, how juicy is that? Feed him to us.
One sec, he's downloading Skype, so we got like 10 minutes.
Can't call them juicy.
Yeah.
Put him in shark pit, man.
That's
I mean,
right.
One thing me and Strife were talking about earlier was the question of kind of the rise of the sermon and that kind of thing. I mean, something, you know, you go along to mass on a Sunday and you listen to the sermon and it gives you some advice on your life. Well, if we're talking about religious ideas and religious concepts, kind of intermingling with atheist ideas and concepts, I'd say the sermon is one of the ones we've actually harnessed. You see them everywhere. Self-help books, live a better life in 30 days.
That honestly sounds like to me just like AA.
Well,
The
yeah,
funny, the best.
but what I mean more is just that, like, live a more positive life, have a more positive outlook. Not necessarily supernatural writings, but more psychological, actions and methods of doing things. It's interesting how that level of indoctrination has kind of become almost trivial in some way, I guess.
I almost wanted to become like a preacher or something like that, just to go in there every time and just bring out the most abhorrent passages and just try to convey them to people. Like pick the.
Oh, don't worry. It
Anytime
happens.
a woman speaks or something in church, just be like, "Yeah, I suffer you not a woman to speak."
Hey, I was part of
That
that.
count.
I was part of that. Women should learn in subjection, silence, and submission.
Women
to
should
men.
be should be servitude to men.
Subject to men
I-
as men
I
are
really
to
want
Christ.
just teach these abhorrent passages and like try to relate them into people's lives. I really want to do.
You mean try to do it today? You mean try to do
People
it today?
do it every week.
Like let's say like I don't know, like women should be servitude to men, just like what's her name from a streetcar named Desire. If anyone read that book, anyone?
I didn't, I'm afraid. I've never heard of it.
A streetcar named Desire. It's a famous play.
Right.
It pretty much the Honeymooners.
No. Sorry.
Does anyone here know the Honeymooners? Where he says like one of these days, I'm gonna hit you to the moon. Pretty much like beat his wife.
Yeah, okay, I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah, like pretty much. I guess you could relate it to that, but it's still really hard to do it.
Well, no, what you're doing is you're applying scripture and molding your life around it. So if women have to submit themselves to their husbands, then that's what you do. If you have to, hate homosexuals, and that's what you do. I mean,
Just tell the congregation not to eat pork, and if a woman steps
you
out of
can't
line,
too much do that.
If a woman steps out of line to at work, you put her in her place, and if your boss fires you, it's okay because you're doing the will of God.
you just beat her the hell out of your congregation, saying, "This is what happens. This is what happens if you go against God. God will strike you down like I'm striking this babe."
And anybody takes the Lord's name in vain, anybody says, "Oh my God," you throw rocks at them until they die. That's what you do on a weekly basis. Your congregation would shrink pretty soon,
I always reply to Ray Comfort on Twitter, you'll follow Jesus all the way up until he starts talking about that rubbish of camels and rich men.
That's right.
I would like to just respond to that question posed by Frohawk. If it isn't a far stretch for the Catholic Church to change Joan of Arc from heretic, as it's difficult to let women be priests, because they're to be seen and not heard, and that's it, really.
They're supposed to be in the kitchen where they're not supposed to be seen.
Oh, like Mother Teresa, do wonderful things, give to the poor, do not ever step out of line, talk too much, and try and impose your opinions on others. That's the main. That's everything in the Catholic Church. But I would say, though, interestingly, especially in the UK, and I'm only going by the diocese I was part of, it's mainly women. The men in Catholicism in the UK, I see less and less of. It's mainly women there. So your question stands, and I don't know why they won't, and I think it will happen soon. Women priests.
Well, the nuns have to stay virginal because the Islamic terrorists are all waiting for them in heaven.
Jeez.
Very nice.
Sorry, was that too much?
That was a.
That was perfect.
That was a Frankie Boyle moment, almost.
What do you say if we make our final conclusions and we'll have a 10-minute break, but we'll have our final conclusions and we'll have the theist on for the after show.
Who is the theist?
His name is Lying of God from, well, his name is JD4U, but his name is Line of God, or Line for God, I forget, from Shock of God's Room. He's a moderator, though.
Sure.
So, how about we go in alphabetical order with Atheist Coffee?
Well, on the topic of indoctrination, if they're if claims are not able to be tested, if they're not verifiable, if they were, you could just submit them. You could just instill in your children a love for truth, a love for knowledge, a love for reality, and that they should seek it. And you can just set them off, in life. Just go and seek truth and look at evidence. But no, what religious creeds all have to do is indoctrinate them into a system of thinking and enforce it, because there is no evidence, because there is very little truth. And the heart of indoctrination is to steer people away from reality, from evidence, from science and the scientific method. And indoctrination just sets you on the path of denying reality, and it ultimately harms humanity.
Bored to bits?
Well, what I always say to people on YouTube, believers on YouTube, is as a parent, remember that the point in time when your child realizes that you've been lying to them is the time they lose all their respect for you. So the sooner you start telling them the truth, the better.
James?
This is never going to end. Because it's the only thing that's keeping these religions alive, and they're going to continue to do it. It relies more and more, in my experience anyway, on generations to generations kind of forcing children into doing things and thinking things that perhaps they don't want to. I remember being aged 11 and going up to a boy in the playground, first year of high school, and telling him that God would have his vengeance on him. This is the scary notions that the Catholic Church, amongst other denominations, still subject their own children to in their own charge. And I think eventually they'll see the mistakes for how they really are. They'll see what they've done to people. I think there is only one answer and one kind of inevitable conclusion to this mindless indoctrination, and that is to go out gracefully without a bang.
Realistic nihilist?
Yeah, I just same thing I said earlier. I think the best tool that we have against any indoctrination is just being skeptical and asking questions and inquiring as to the nature of everything. And the reason I think that's the best answer is because when you get them to really, if you ask them questions and you get them to justify their position, that's really the best offense, because that forces them to think, that forces them to question their beliefs. And I think that's just the way to, certainly works the best with children, certainly stops children right in their tracks from their indoctrination, and I think it would be the best tool to use against adults who are indoctrinated.
Okay, and this is the Lion Ghost Show, and we will be back in 10 minutes for the after show, and thank you for watching.